The list is 1 page long, 38 names, typed in plain government font, sitting inside a document issued by Congo's Ministry of Mines. No photographs, no maps, no dramatic language, just 38 mining sites scattered across the eastern provinces of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Maniema, formally declared off-limits to legal trade. On paper, this document should have changed everything. It meant that any tin, tantalum, tungsten, or gold coming from these 38 locations was now officially illegal to buy, sell, transport, or export. It meant that international companies sourcing minerals from Congo now had a specific government-issued list of places their supply chains were required to avoid. And yet, according to reporting by Reuters and investigations from mineral traceability organizations, minerals from at least some of these very sites kept moving. They kept crossing checkpoints, they kept reaching trading posts, and in some documented cases, they kept finding their way into the same international export channels the ban was designed to close. This is the story of what happens when a government draws a line on a map and discovers that a line on a map means almost nothing to an armed group holding the ground on the other side of it. To understand why this list exists at all, you have to understand a system most people outside the mining industry have never heard of. A system built specifically to answer one question. How do you tell a clean mine from a conflict mine when they can sit less than a day's walk apart? For over a decade, Congo's mineral traders operated under a colour-coded classification system developed alongside the international traceability schemes we've explored throughout this series. Mining sites are assessed by validation teams, typically composed of Congolese government officials, sometimes joined by representatives from the International Conference on the Great Lakes region and international observers, and categorised based on specific criteria. Is the site free of armed group presence? Is it free of child labour and forced labour? Does it meet basic safety and governance standards? A site that passes this assessment is classified green, cleared for legal trade, eligible to have its minerals tagged and certified as conflict-free under the ITSCI system we've discussed elsewhere in this series. A site with some concerns but not disqualifying ones might be marked yellow, requiring further monitoring, and a site found to be under armed group control, using forced or child labour, or otherwise failing to meet basic standards is marked red, banned outright from legal trade until conditions change. This system was built with real, serious intentions. It represented years of negotiation between the Congolese government, regional bodies, and an international community trying to translate the abstract idea of conflict-free minerals into something concrete enough to actually enforce on the ground, mine by mine, hillside by hillside. The list of 38 banned sites represents one of the most significant applications of this red list mechanism in recent memory. A formal acknowledgement by Congo's own government that dozens of mining locations across its eastern provinces had fallen under conditions serious enough to warrant an outright trading ban. According to Reuters reporting on the list, the banned sites span territory affected by exactly the kind of armed group control this documentary series has traced in detail. Areas where militias, and in a growing number of cases M23 itself, tax and control mineral extraction, and areas where labour conditions, including the use of children in mining tunnels, have been documented by human rights monitors and journalists. Placing a site on this list is, in theory, a serious administrative action. It's meant to trigger a cascade of consequences. Legitimate trading houses are supposed to refuse to buy from it. ITSCI-affiliated tagging agents are supposed to stop issuing tags for material claiming to originate there, and downstream smelters, who rely on this documentation as the foundation of their own certification, are supposed to be able to identify and reject any shipment tracing back to a banned location. The problem, according to years of on-the-ground reporting and investigation, is that almost every one of those steps depends on a level of physical enforcement Congo's central government simply does not have the capacity to provide in the territories where these mines actually sit. This is the uncomfortable structural reality underneath the entire ban. North and South Kivu are not regions where the Congolese state exercises full, reliable control. Large sections of this territory are governed in practice by armed groups, some independent militias with local grievances stretching back decades, some linked to Rwanda and Uganda, and increasingly since 2021, M23 itself, which has captured major mining areas including Rubaya and, by early 2025, entire provincial capitals like Goma and Bukavu. A ban issued from an office in Kinshasa, the capital, sitting over 1,000 miles away on the opposite side of the country, carries very different weight depending on whether the mine in question sits in territory the government actually controls, or territory controlled by the exact armed groups the ban is trying to cut off from revenue. Reuters reporting on the effectiveness of this and similar bans found a pattern that traceability advocates have documented for years across different iterations of Congo's red list system. Minerals from banned or red sites don't simply stop moving, they get mixed, or from a banned mine can be transported a short distance to a nearby site with legitimate green certification, blended with properly tagged material, and sold onward as though it originated entirely from the clean source. Because tantalum, tin and tungsten are chemically indistinguishable once processed, regardless of which specific hillside they came from, a limitation we've examined throughout this series, there is no test capable of catching this kind of blending after the fact. The only real safeguard is the paperwork and the physical chain of custody at the point of origin, and it's precisely that chain of custody that armed group control, corruption and porous checkpoints make so difficult to guarantee. There's a second, quieter failure mode that Reuters and other investigators have documented as well, the sheer difficulty of monitoring compliance on the ground at all. Validation teams responsible for classifying and reclassifying sites operate with limited resources, limited security in dangerous territory, and infrequent visits to remote mining locations that can be a full day's travel from the nearest paved road. A site banned 1 year might not be reassessed again for a long stretch of time, meaning the red list itself can become outdated, either failing to catch newly compromised sites quickly enough or failing to recognise when conditions at a banned site have genuinely improved, leaving legitimate miners locked out of legal trade for reasons that may no longer fully apply. This last point matters enormously to the human story underneath this policy, and it's a dimension of the ban that rarely gets attention in coverage focused primarily on corporate accountability. A ban is not an abstract administrative action for the miners actually working these sites. For the tens of thousands of artisanal miners across Eastern Congo who depend on selling ore for their livelihoods, a site's classification is the difference between being able to legally sell what they dig and being locked entirely out of the formal economy, pushed instead toward the same informal, unregulated and often armed group-controlled trading networks the ban was designed to eliminate in the first place. Human rights organisations working in the region have long pointed out this uncomfortable irony. Bans intended to protect miners from exploitation by armed groups can, in practice, push those same miners deeper into dependence on the very networks the policy is trying to dismantle, because a banned mine still needs to sell its ore to someone. And if legitimate buyers are barred from purchasing it, the buyers willing to break that rule are, almost by definition, the ones already operating outside any accountability system at all. This is one of the least discussed tensions in the entire conflict minerals debate. Enforcement mechanisms designed with good intentions can create economic vacuums that only illicit actors are positioned to fill, unless the policy is paired with genuine alternative support for the miners affected, support that has historically been inconsistent and underfunded relative to the scale of the problem. The list of 38 sites also arrived at a politically fraught moment, layered directly on top of the escalating military crisis involving M23. As the rebel group expanded its territorial control through 2024 and into 2025, seizing mining areas and eventually major cities, including Goma and Bukavu, the practical relevance of any red list mechanism became increasingly complicated. How do you enforce a trading ban on a mine that sits inside territory now controlled by an armed group? The state itself has been unable to dislodge militarily. Congo's government could issue the ban. It could not, in any meaningful operational sense, send inspectors, police, or customs officials into M23-held territory to enforce it. The ban became, in the areas most affected by the conflict, a legal fact with limited physical reach, a real documented government action whose enforcement depended entirely on cooperation from armed groups who had no incentive whatsoever to comply, since compliance would mean giving up exactly the tax revenue this documentary series has already shown funds their military operations. This dynamic puts international companies further down the supply chain in a genuinely difficult position, and it's worth being fair to the complexity here rather than assigning blame too simply. A smelter or electronics manufacturer relying on Congo's official red list to guide its sourcing decisions is depending on a list that may not reflect the fastest moving realities on the ground in territory changing hands between government and armed group control, sometimes within the space of months. Apple's 2024 decision to suspend sourcing tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from both Congo and Rwanda entirely, rather than attempting to navigate site-by-site classifications, reflects exactly this problem. When the underlying map of who controls which mine is shifting this quickly, a granular red list system built for a more stable environment starts to strain against a reality it wasn't designed to keep pace with. Congo's legal offensive against Apple, filed in France and Belgium in December 2024, drew directly on this exact tension. The complaint alleged that despite the existence of mechanisms like the Red List ban and the broader ITSCI certification system, conflict minerals had continued entering Apple's supply chain, an argument that, if accepted by French and Belgian courts, would represent a significant legal precedent, that the mere existence of a due diligence banning system is not sufficient legal protection for a company if that system can be shown to have failed in practice. Apple has denied knowingly sourcing conflict minerals and maintains it conducts rigorous due diligence. The litigation remains unresolved. But the case itself puts a spotlight on the exact vulnerability this ban was meant to close, and according to the evidence Congo's legal team has presented, has not fully succeeded in closing. There is a broader question sitting underneath all of this, one that applies not just to this specific list of 38 sites, but to the entire architecture of conflict mineral regulation built over the past 15 years. What is a ban actually worth if the government issuing it lacks the physical capacity to enforce it in the exact territory the ban targets? This is not a rhetorical question meant to dismiss the effort entirely. The red list system, imperfect as it is, has provided real, if incomplete, structure to an industry that previously had almost none. It has given international companies a concrete document to point to, given researchers a baseline to measure change against, and given Congo's government a formal tool to express which parts of its own territory it considers compromised by conflict, even in places it cannot currently reach. Compared to having no classification system at all, this represents genuine, meaningful progress, a point traceability advocates are careful to make even as they document the system's failures. But the gap between the list and the ground remains the defining feature of this entire policy. A document issued in Kinshasa carries the full weight of Congolese law. It carries considerably less weight at a checkpoint in North Kivu manned by fighters loyal to an armed group that answers to no ministry, follows no red list, and has every financial incentive to keep the ore moving, regardless of what a government office 1,000 miles away has decided to call it. Somewhere on that list of 38 names sits a mine indistinguishable on the ground from the hillside next to it. Same red clay, same hand-dug tunnels, same exhausted miners working for a few dollars a day. The only difference between the banned site and its neighbour is a classification decided by a validation team that may not have visited in months, enforced by a government that may not control the road leading to it, monitored by an international certification system that has repeatedly been shown capable of being circumvented at exactly this stage. Everything downstream, the trader, the exporter, the smelter, the capacitor, the finished device in someone's pocket, inherits whatever truth or fiction that classification actually reflects. The final question this leaves behind is not whether Congo's government has tried to draw a meaningful line between conflict minerals and clean ones. The existence of this list, and years of similar classification efforts before it, prove that the effort has been real and sustained. The question is whether a line drawn on paper can ever hold in territory where the state's authority ends at exactly the point where the conflict begins, and whether any ban, however carefully documented, can outlast the guns of the people standing on the wrong side of it. If this documentary helped you understand a policy tool that rarely gets explained beyond a single headline, share your thoughts in the comments. This is a story that deserves careful, honest discussion. If you found this reporting valuable, please share it, because accountability in these supply chains depends on more people understanding how these systems actually function and where they fail. And if you want more deeply researched documentaries that go beneath the surface of stories the news usually leaves unexplained, like this video and subscribe, because there is still more of this story left to tell.